appstate.edu. And from Hendrick Acura, open in-store and online with pickup and delivery options available, a no-contact digital sales experience, and the new 2022 RDX and MDX. Details at hendrickacura.com.
This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins on the local news roundup. Charlotte City Council okay spending on Spectrum Center renovations, a new practice facility for the Hornets, and on a study for the final leg of the streetcar. Mecklenburg County adds $30 million to the CMS budget, but that's still short of the increase the schools requested. The South Carolina primary is another test of Donald Trump's ongoing influence. We check on the winners and losers. Hey, want a clear backpack? Still saying they're safe. CMS decides to auction off the 46,000 backpacks that have cancer warning tags on them. You might be able to get a good deal there. And the Gaston County manager removes an LGBTQ-oriented photo and a Black Lives Matter photo from a museum exhibit. Here to talk about those stories and more is WFAE political reporter Steve Harrison. Good morning, Steve.
Hey, good morning, Mike.
Nick Oxner is here. He's WBTV's chief investigative reporter and executive producer of investigations for them and for Charlotte Squawks. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike. Happy Friday.
Yes, Seema Iyer is here. She's chief legal correspondent for WJZY's Queen City News. Seema, welcome back.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
And Shamaria Morrison is here from WCNC TV. Good morning. Welcome back, Shamaria.
Good morning.
This week, Charlotte City Council voted 10-1 to spend $275 million to renovate the Spectrum Center and to build a standalone practice facility for the Charlotte Hornets. What did we get in exchange, pray tell?
So I think the two things from the city's perspective. The first is that in theory, the arena will be improved and renovated, although the city hasn't really given any details about what the Hornets are going to do. There's been some vague talk about, roof repairs, new HVAC, better food and beverage, but there hasn't been a detailed list put out of what's going to change inside the arena. The other thing is that the Hornets have agreed to extend their lease that was going to end in 2030. Now it will go through 2045.
And this wasn't something the city just whimsically did. They are contractually obligated to spend a certain amount of money on improvements from time to time. Steve, you say the city has to keep the arena, quote, among the most modern in the league. And if there are amenities that more than half of NBA arenas have, the Hornets are entitled to ask for it. That's by the contract. The city evidently spent more on these improvements than they were obligated to spend, however. Why did they do that?
Well, right. The city says they were on the hook, that contractually on the hook for $173 million. Now, again, we haven't really seen that list and seen what that is. We're just kind of taking their word for it. But then they decided to put in another $42 million, as well as $60 million for a practice facility. And that 42 plus 60 is what extended the lease for 15 years. So they feel like the city feels like that was a good deal to keep the team longer.
Had the Hornets asked for a practice facility to be built for them?
Yes. So that was one of the things that right now they practice inside the arena on one court. And I guess a lot of NBA teams are moving to kind of a bigger facility, standalone facility. So they want something with two courts. And I assume, more offices, more room. And there's kind of two options for that. One is to just build it next door to the arena on a gravel parking lot. The other is to, we've talked about before on the show, this big complex where the bus station across Trade Street would be put underground. There would be this big new development of offices and retail, including the new practice facility. Yeah.
The Hornets, whenever you give money to a sports franchise or to an arena, there's always controversy that surrounds that. And the debate continues to rage on about the benefits derived from that by cities and its citizens. But the Hornets aren't the only entity that will benefit from these improvements. Area businesses do as well. And Pierre Bader was among the uptown business owners. He owns a bunch of restaurants who supported this move. He explained it to WSOC TV this way.
It's a money well spent. I'm a little selfish on being here because every time that there is a concert or there is a basketball game, we're absolutely packed.
As we said, the vote, I think, was 10-1 on council, indicating that most people on council agreed with council member Renee Johnson.
It's not just about, making the rich richer, that's some of the narrative that we hear. This for me is the right thing to do for our city.
But this is another example of things happening very quickly. And Steve, you reported council member Malcolm Graham says the city needs more transparency on these things. He said he felt that they, quote, missed the plane when it took off and caught it at the airport when it was landing, and it would be nice to be involved in a lot more. What did he mean by that?
So yeah, really 2 weeks ago, the city kind of unveiled this plan for the first time. And, before council gave them a presentation on what they were doing, then on Monday night of this week, there was a public hearing where a few people got to weigh in, and then there was a vote. So this was really a 2-week window on spending $275 million. And, one of the problems is, council says they want more time, they want more transparency, but it's one thing to kind of say it, but that doesn't really, I don't think that really changes a whole lot. I mean, the city will if the city won the vote, the city got what they wanted, they will continue to kind of run things through council in this way until there's a consequence for not giving the public more time to weigh in.
That's exactly, we've heard lip service from council members recently about, oh, we need more transparency. And that's come after they've been beat over the head for the last 3 or 4 years about the lack of transparency in the city. But this is exactly what we're talking about. I would actually say, Mike, this was a whimsical decision because we had 2 weeks to think about spending $270 million on a thing that we knew about. I mean, you hear Tracy Dodson, you hear city staffers say, well, we're contractually obligated. All the more reason that it's inexcusable that we spent 2 weeks talking about it. They could have brought this up. They should have a planning cycle where this is coming up a year, 6 months ahead, not 2 weeks. That is in no way a standard and best practice.
Yeah. And I was just going to say one thing, Mike. A decade ago, around like 2014, the city put in about $30 million of arena improvements because, the contract at that point said they were obligated to. At that time, city staff kind of released publicly a list of all the things the Hornets wanted. And then they released, the city kind of said, okay, we agreed to this, this, and this, and we rejected these things. I mean, they kind of were transparent about this negotiating process of what we think we are obligated to do and what we don't think we're obligated to do. And this time the city just kind of said, yeah, we have to do 173. And there was no questions, very different.
It just seems that there's always this lack of transparency for the community because they look to, let's say, other NBA facilities in the country. They know it diminishes quality of life a lot of times for people. I just use the Brooklyn Nets as an example. When that stadium went up, just the noise level and the crowds and the crime increases. So there's so many issues. So without giving the community a chance to weigh in, it's because they know the answer.
I threw out that $275 million figure. That's for everything, all in. That's for the renovations. It's for the practice facility and more. It cost us $265 million to build that arena 20 years ago. This is now an additional $215 million for an upfit. That seems a little out of whack to me, but I'm not a contractor. $42 million will go toward building the Hornets this new practice facility. Where do they practice now?
So now they're inside the arena. There's you can kind of on one side of the arena, you can look through some windows. There's one court right now. And then I think they say they want 2.
They can't use upstairs?
Look, I literally was driving home from Charlotte Squawks on Tuesday night, past that room, and saw LaMelo Ball practicing at 10:15 at night.
Yeah, you can look through the windows, get a free show there. You can go to a free game, pickup game. There's some question about exactly, and we just talked about this. You mentioned that there are 2 options for this practice facility to be located. One is the gravel lot that's across the street from the arena, and another would be where the bus station is now. And we've already seen plans on television and in the paper, and we've talked about it on the radio about how that would be. It's a multi-story building with the buses and trains being put underground, and retail and restaurants and bars in the middle, with then parking, and then on top of all that would be the Hornets practice facility. And some of this troubles Councilwoman Dimple Ajmera.
I share the concerns about underground bus facility.
What are those concerns?
So I think there's a bit of a concern that now, let me just back up, that Katz in the city say this new bus facility would be really state of the art, that there would be this like air conditioned concourse for the passengers, modern and clean and amenities. But the city has also acknowledged that there is a public safety problem today at the bus station. And so the question is, is it a good idea to kind of take this problem and just kind of bury it underground and put it out of sight? Is that going to make the situation better or worse? And there are some council members, we just heard from Dimple Ajmera, Braxton Winston also expressed concerns. I think Julie Eiselt has reservations as to whether this is a good idea. So I think that the idea of the practice facility going there is, I think that may be a stretch. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised in a year if the Hornets are building their facility next door to the arena, as opposed to this massive project across the street.
There's a big complex available right now in South Carolina that they might want to consider. Braxton Winston, as you mentioned, voted no on this. He called the contract a bad deal, citing future concerns and a poorly executed existing lease. Do the things that they talked about and voted on change any of that?
I think one thing with when you talked about the existing lease, and this is something that other council members talked about as well, I think it's important to go back to when the arena was built, because, we had the Hornets, the original Hornets at the Coliseum on Tyvola, and they left town so quickly, with this idea that it was obsolete. And so when the city built the Spectrum Center, they kind of they put in these guaranteed almost requirements that they spend money on it. They kind of didn't want to go through this process of having their arena fall behind and become obsolete. So they, in a way, like we talked about with these amenities, they almost made themselves do this because they did not want to go through having to build a new arena and lose another team.
The Hornets will pay a total of $32 million in rent through 2045 and continue their $1.1 million capital fund contribution through 2045. I think they have to do that each year, which amounts to about $23 million. So they will pay $55 million, and we will spend $215 million. Does the city make any money on the other events that are held there, like concerts and graduation ceremonies and these big truck pull things that go on there?
So no, the Hornets, the city owns the building. The Hornets manage it for the city. And if there's a concert and there is profits from that concert, that goes to the Charlotte Hornets, not the city. Now, the city's view would be that this provides, one, entertainment for people who live in Charlotte. It provides economic impact, et cetera, for hotels and restaurants. But the Hornets make the money from the team. They make money from the other events.
Sweet deal. Aside from the extension to 2045 on the Hornets lease, they promised to be there at least until then. Were there any changes made to our contract with them or the contractual obligations that we have with them?
I think the big one is they will start paying rent, like you said earlier. They don't do that today.
Okay, we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what City Council did this week, including appropriating money for a study for the streetcar, the next leg of the streetcar. And there's a little controversy brewing about the mayor participating in a transportation ad that ran briefly in Charlotte and then was yanked from the air for whatever reason we do not know. Let's talk about that and much more as we go through this hour. It's the local news roundup on Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE listeners and Mazda of South Charlotte, pledging to help end child hunger in the Carolinas through ongoing support of Second Harvest Food Bank of Metrolina. Details about this initiative at mazdaofsouthcharlotte.com. And Charlotte Squawks NC-17, making fun of pop culture, sports, life, and politics in Charlotte and beyond. Now through June 26th at Booth Playhouse. Charlotte Squawks tickets on sale now at BlumenthalArts.org. Monday on this program, reckoning with America's history of slavery and how this ugly chapter is taught. It's become a hot button issue. How the story is told and who does the telling matters. Clint Smith, the staff writer for The Atlantic and a Davidson College alum, has spent a lot of time pondering this. In his best-selling book, How the Word is Passed, he visits sites from plantations to monuments central to the history of slavery, and he will share his thoughts about that and more Monday at 9.
It's your world. We help you explore it.
Another ripple effect of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is two Scandinavian countries looking to abandon their long-standing neutrality.
It's your community. We help you understand it.
All the plans would close Duke's remaining coal-fired plants by 2035 and add new gas-fired plants, solar and wind farms.
WFAE's Morning Edition is an essential way to start your day and stay connected to your world. Weekday mornings from 5 to 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
It's Charlotte Talks and the local news roundup on 90.7 WFAE. I'm Mike Collins. We're here with WFAE's political reporter Steve Harrison. Shamaria Morrison is a reporter for WCNC TV. Seema Iyer is the chief legal correspondent for Queen City News on WJZY TV, and Nick Oxner is the chief investigative reporter at WBTV. A lot of TV people here. They all have makeup on and they're looking good this morning. City Council voted Monday night as well to spend nearly $4.3 million on the planning and design of an extension of the CityLinks Gold Line. This is the streetcar. This would extend the line from Hawthorne Lane out to the old Eastland Mall site along Central Avenue on the east side of Uptown, and then from French Street to Rosa Parks Center along Beatties Ford Road on the northwest side. It would increase the line by 10 miles. I think it would make the line 10 miles long. We have, I think, 4 miles of it existing right now. Earlier, we talked on this program about questions about right-of-way for this extension. Have those issues been resolved?
Yes and no. I think Katz has said that it's going to be impossible to give the gold line kind of its own right away, like the blue line, where you're just totally separate. What they're trying to do with the study is a couple things. Can the streetcar have its own lane, maybe its own dedicated lane on Central or Beatties Ford? And if it can do that, then can they make it give it what's called signal prioritization, where the streetcar approaches a red light, the light turns to green and it keeps moving to keep the thing moving. Katz has said, look, if the whole 10-mile line goes as fast as the 4-mile line today, it's not worth doing. A lot of council members agree. There was a lot of concern 2 weeks ago, but again, to kind of what Nick said earlier, then there was a little bit of huffing and puffing about it, but the study went forward in an 8-3 vote on Monday.
Yeah,
I mean, at one point, council members were saying they weren't going to vote for the extension unless they had dedicated right of way, right? I mean, like a month ago. And here we have now the study moving forward without the dedicated right of way.
Yeah, and we had some pushback, as you mentioned, from members of council. Mayor Pro Tem Julie Eiselt said we need to find ways to pick up speed along the corridor so that it operates more like light rail. Streetcars don't do that. Streetcars are on the street. That's why they are called red flag streetcars. And Councilman Tariq Bakari said it's up to council to adjust and fix the hand they were dealt with the streetcar design before he voted no. And he vowed to continue voting no on major Katz initiatives until structural problems with leadership are fixed. What's that all about?
That is a reference to, in the past year, Katz has had a lot of operational problems. The Gold Line has not run on schedule due to staffing shortages and other problems. Nick, your colleague David Hodges wrote a great story about so-called ghost buses, where there are just numerous buses throughout the day that aren't showing up. So there's these kind of multiple operation problems throughout the system. And yeah, Tariq Bakari is saying we have to change that first before we move forward with anything else.
So despite all these operational problems that the current streetcar is plagued with, and the fact that they haven't got right of way to do what they like to do to speed up the streetcar along the extension, why did they vote yes?
I think it's a very, oh, Nick, you go ahead. Sorry.
Well, no, my response was really just a shrug with bewildered eyes. I mean, it is one thing that, what are you going to not move forward on this plan? We know the city needs alternate forms of transportation. We know, light rail and streetcars are part of the strategy to reduce car commuting in Charlotte. At the same time, I mean, this was a dumb decision from the start, the way the whole streetcar has been made and constructed. But now we are hundreds of millions of dollars down this rabbit hole, and we're just going to scrap it now because we don't like it. That's not really an option. It's almost, you could say, it feels like we're having the same conversation about the Gold Line that we are about the arena. Some previous councils made some decisions that, whether the current council likes it or not, they kind of need to go with.
And I think politically,
we've been talking about the streetcar for 25, 30 years. And for a while, we had the old fashioned streetcar on the track that went through the center of town, and just to get people used to the idea of having one. Other cities have streetcars. Are those streetcars plagued with the kinds of delays that our streetcar apparently is plagued with?
I'm not sure if they're having the same problems with delays, but one thing that's happened nationwide, so the big streetcar boom, construction boom, kind of started in the Obama administration when they loosened the funding to build these. So then when there's money available, cities just jump at it like Charlotte did. But what's happened now is that kind of the streetcar construction boom, which was, 2008, 2012, that's kind of tapered off. There's just not as many of these projects moving forward as there were before. But Mike, like you said, going back when this originally started in 2009, all of these issues about right of way, going in traffic with cars, these were all discussed. These problems, I mean, this is not a surprise to anyone.
And Tariq Bakari is not the only politician concerned about operational concerns. Republican State Representative David Willis of Union County says that CATS needs to improve its operations before he would consider any kind of an increase in taxes, which is going to be necessary to build out the Blue Line, et cetera, to fund the growth of the service. And he pointed to slowdowns on the streetcar and the pattern of buses not showing up at all.
It's a mess. I mean, they don't have enough staff to run the routes that are currently existing. Buses are missing hours of routes. People can't get to work on time as it is.
He's a state representative, and Raleigh will have to get involved in this if there's going to be a tax increase. He's from Union County. But that leads us to this. Mayor Vi Lyles is the spokesperson for an ad being run and paid for by the Natural Resources Defense Council Action Fund, advocating for more transportation options. Here's a portion of that ad.
I'm proud that we're one of the fastest growing regions in America, but we've got to make sure that growth doesn't turn into gridlock. That's why we need more frequent buses, more walking trails and bike lanes, and more light rail to get us home from work faster.
This ad is running in Raleigh, but not in Charlotte. It was here on the air for a brief moment, and they pulled it after Queen City News on WJZY started asking questions about it. Seema, I know that wasn't your story, but do you know what questions were being asked?
I do. I know my colleague Emma Withrow was on this story, and she still has those questions unanswered. What happened? Was it just a mistake? And she hasn't had it answered. However, it is confounding because, and I think what it's, the stir up is that transportation officials in Charlotte, they've already, have these issues like you all express about the Lynx Gold Line extension. And the other issue, just for me, when I look at this, it looks completely inappropriate that if they're going to lawmakers, if she wants to go to lawmakers and be part of the conversation to ask for more money and why, it shouldn't be done in a commercial. I think Emma Withrow spoke to people who said that wouldn't even be persuasive, a commercial. What is persuasive, what's the appropriate mechanism is to have a meeting, speak on public record, have a hearing on it. but this commercial thing seems it's a very cheap way to get more money.
Well, it's a $750,000 ad buy that started in Charlotte, was pulled and is airing in Raleigh, I guess, with the obvious intention of getting the attention of legislators. Are they in session? If they're not in session, they're not in Raleigh. And the Natural Resource Defense Council Action Fund is paying for it. So who cares if they spend $1 billion on it? It's not our money.
They are in session. It's the short session. And so
Okay.
they're having votes a couple days a week. But yes, this is the very narrow piece of this year where lawmakers in session. But, let's get back to what would actually move the needle on increased funding or to get Republicans on board with allowing the vote on the 1 cent sales tax increase. And that's back to what we were just talking about CATS being able to operate with its, we see massive delays on the Gold Line as Steve talked about, my colleague David Hodges' story on the buses aren't running on time. We see issues periodically with the Blue Line. It's hard to make an argument for anyone to say that CATS is functioning like it's supposed to now. And so, you heard this Republican state lawmaker from Union County just talk about the skepticism. Those are exactly the kind of people that you have to convince, Republicans representing suburban or rural counties, and they don't understand or need to, they're not automatically on board with Big Charlotte getting more money, especially when the transit system doesn't operate properly. And so $750,000 in ads ain't going to help that.
So before we move on, the Charlotte area transit system is also making significant changes to the planned Silver Line extension that would run from Matthews to the airport. That portion of the line, the whole line, would go from Matthews to Belmont, but the stretch from Matthews to the airport, I think they're looking at changing the route. What are they now proposing?
Yeah, before the Silver Line, it would kind of enter Uptown in the first ward, and then it was going to kind of skirt all the way around the edge of the city, follow I-277, skirt around Uptown. And there were some transit advocates who wanted it to get closer into town, like just, get closer to Trade and Tryon Street where people work. CATS had always said, no, that's too complicated. This is better for development. But then the Urban Land Institute earlier this year did a study for them and said, look, if you guys want to get the federal government to fund this, you need to bring it closer to Uptown. So what the new plan is to have it kind of share the Blue Line tracks. It would make a hard left turn and then share the Blue Line tracks all the way through Uptown. So you'd have Blue Line trains and Silver Line trains on the same rails.
And just to put that in perspective and to again underscore just how incompetent CATS seems to be, this was a plan that CATS, and Steve did a good job in his newsletter, I think, that he wrote this week, about how CATS said, no, we absolutely cannot do this plan, the plan that they're now proposing, for the last 3 years. And suddenly, here we are proposing this plan.
And I believe there are other transit systems where incoming lines begin to share the same rail for a period of time, and it seems to work fine. This will actually cost less money than the plan that skirts Uptown. How much less?
About $1 billion less.
How much?
1 billion.
One with the
real
B?
money. 1 B.
Okay, that's real money.
Real money.
They do say that the new proposal would take away what was initially proposed to be a seamless ride from Matthews to the airport. This new proposal would have 2 segments. Does that mean you'd have to get off the train and then get on another train?
It would. In a way, it would no longer be the Silver Line singular. It would be the Silver Lines, because the line from the airport would probably terminate at the Gateway Station or maybe to Trade and Tryon if it uses the streetcar tracks. And then, so that is a downside, clearly. CATS says that they expect only about 6% of the riders to kind of go from one end to the other, or from, the east side to the west side. So that is certainly a downside. I think the idea is that, though, it's kind of offset by having it come closer into Uptown.
Okay. When will they make a final decision on this?
They're going to be talking about this fall. I think there's some public hearings coming up. And then, but again, the final decision, it all kind of depends on this, transit sales tax we just talked about. So long way off.
Meanwhile, Uptown was booming prior to the pandemic. We had all kinds of things going on, and then the pandemic hit. Everybody shut down. Workers went home. Epicenter went under. All the bars on College seemed to close. A lot of restaurants went under. Michael Smith, who is the CEO of Charlotte Center City Partners, gave a presentation this week to City Council on where Uptown stands now. What did he have to say?
Not bad. Is essentially what Center City Partners is saying is, look, essentially the message that they're putting out is that Charlotte is recovering faster and better than other cities of our size. We're seeing more business coming back into Uptown. People are getting back to work there. And more interesting in their presentation, I thought, was the acknowledgement that South End and Uptown are starting to merge into one district, which has always been thought of as the center city, but becoming even more seamless between the two. So you put all that together in a surprisingly rosy outlook.
Yeah, could it be argued that South End would be considered part of Uptown were it not for 277?
Are you arguing for the moat, Mike?
Sure, let's put a river through it. But Michael Smith did say that the future of Uptown is bright, despite only 50% of workers returning to Uptown offices. And he said that because in many cities, only 30% of those workers have returned. We just had a primary election, but early voting, I can't believe this is true, but it is, early voting for Charlotte City Council and mayor is only about a month away, because that election will not be held in November. It will be held in July. Do you think people know this?
I didn't.
You do now. The Black Political Caucus, therefore, gave at-large candidates for city council a chance to make their stances on issues clear this week. There are 8 at-large candidates. 7 showed up for that forum. Affordable housing came up as an issue, as did concerns about transportation, crime, and education. What, if anything, did we learn about these candidates and where they stand?
I did not attend the forum, Mike, but just kind of an overview. There is a full slate of Republicans running for at-large city council for the first time since, I believe, 2013. They are campaigning very hard. They hope that this incredibly low turnout election will give them a chance to win a seat, a citywide seat, for the first time since 2009. But very long odds. I mean, just the numbers, the voter registration numbers in Charlotte heavily favor Democrats.
So this election will be held at the height of vacation season in July. What's the date? What is election day? Do you know? Nobody
July
knows.
26th.
Oh, July 26th. They couldn't have waited till November?
Well, remember, we have so many other elections going on this year because we've had election chaos for the last 18 months because of redistricting and the census. And so we're squeezing in a ton of elections that some of which we should have done last year, all into this year on top of this year's elections. That being said, I don't know what would have gotten you less attention, being the city council candidate on a ballot with the U.S. Senate and a million other contests, or having your election July 26th.
They already, they were supposed to have their election in November 2021. So if they pushed it to November 2022, they would have given themselves a full extra year without having to face the voters. So I think that was the reason they moved for the summer.
Speaking of elections, South Carolina held their primary this week, and the results are in the number that the nation is most interested in is not the numbers in individual races, but the totals among the various candidates for whom Donald Trump was promoting, and his track record in terms of his lingering influence on Republican primaries around the country. How did Donald Trump do? What was the outcome?
50-50, 1-1. We saw Trump candidates challenging 2 incumbents. I think it's more significant that Nancy Mace, the challenger who fended off a Trump-backed candidate, pulled it out.
We'll come back and we'll talk about some of the particulars of that and what the South Carolina's incumbent Republican Governor Henry McMaster had to say about his resounding victory in his race against Harrison Trucker Bob Musselwhite. There's a name for you. We'll come back and talk about that, about the county detention center closing for juveniles, about backpacks and graduations, and more in a moment at Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE listeners and Atrium Health, dedicated to promoting better lives to better health with comprehensive care focused on overall wellness. Atrium health. And Davidson Community Players presenting the musical Legally Blonde, featuring upbeat, energetic music and based on the film of the same name, June 23rd through July 3rd. Tickets at davidsoncommunityplayers.org. Well, the roundup of the week's news continues with a look at national news around the nation on 1A in 20 minutes as the public hearings into the January 6th insurrection continue. Attention is also turning to what happened on January 5th. Plus, the Fed makes a big move. And the COVID vaccine for our youngest kids could be available by next week. Jen White and her assembly of reporters get into it all in 20 minutes at 10 o'clock on 1A. And we will continue our look at the week's local news with our roundtable of reporters in just a mere 30 seconds. Stay with us.
Start your afternoons with WFAE's All Things Considered for the latest local and international news of the day.
Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in North Carolina. Electrifying public vehicle fleets is an important strategy, but supply chain delays have hindered progress toward those goals.
Join me, WFAE's Gwendolyn Glenn and NPR host weekdays 4 to 6:30 p.m. on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org.
It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE, the local news roundup. We have with us Steve Harrison from WFAE News, Nick Oxner from WBTV, Seema Iyer from WJZY's Queen City News, and Shamaria Morrison from WCNC TV. Before we go back and talk about the South Carolina primary, Shamaria just let me know that we have breaking news this morning from the Associated Press and also from WCNC TV. The FDA has authorized the first COVID-19 shots for infants and preschoolers. So, Mario, I think we were expecting this to happen next week. It's happened as of this morning?
Yeah. I just checked on the FDA's website, their Twitter page, and just said it. So basically, that just means that for U.S. kids under 5, that's about 18 million kids. As early as next week, they can begin. North Carolina and South Carolina was one of the states that pre-ordered those shots, and so they should be going in arms soon.
Pretty soon, yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier this week, we did a whole hour on the state of COVID right now because our COVID cases in Mecklenburg and the 6 surrounding counties are rising. Hospitalizations are not rising as fast as the number of infections, and that's partly due to people who have been vaccinated, although I think something along the lines of 50% or so of adults have yet to get their second shot. And the only group unable to get shots at the moment are children 6 months to 5 years. And this FDA approval makes that happen. We talked to Atrium health officials and we have stocked up on these shots. So they will be available as soon as the release comes through and says, yes, you can do this. Do we have any idea of how many parents would want their children of that age to get these shots?
I don't think the numbers are as good as health officials would want it to be. And I say that because you look at the group that was approved for between 5 and 17, those numbers aren't as high as adults, for example. I don't have the exact numbers right now at the moment, but it's not as good. And you hear health officials talk about it. There's one more step left, the CDC. Rochelle Walensky, the CDC director, also has to, give how they're going to be given out and things of that sort. So still one more step left, but they're expected to be able to get shots in arms next week.
And to be clear, these are lower dosage shots of the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines that have been in use since almost the start of the vaccination program. They are mRNA vaccines, and they are as safe as any vaccines can be, and as most vaccines that kids get in the normal course of their early lives. So some of those concerns should be defrayed. Back to the South Carolina primary, which all eyes were on because of Donald Trump's influence in endorsing Republican candidates. Representative Tom Rice was one of 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach Trump after the Capitol riot. He was easily defeated by Trump-backed challenger State Representative Russell Fry. It is a Republican state, South Carolina. Will he likely go to Congress in the fall? Could the House Select Committee hearings that have been going on for the last several weeks and that have been airing on TV and that are showing and painting a damning picture of the former president, what he knew, and his participation in that insurrection, could that change people's minds about Republicans who supported him and who were endorsed by him?
Nick is
Not-
saying no.
Yeah, not enough in a district like Tom Rice's in South Carolina. No, I don't think it's going to have a meaningful impact.
Unless, and I only say this because Pence is really emerging as a hero to everybody just for his actions on January 6th, he was 40 feet from the rioters. The security put him in this kind of bunker and some type of room. And he was there for 4.5 hours. And then afterwards, when his staff and other attorneys of his were all taken away in cars, he refused to leave. He stayed. He was in physical danger. Democrat Zoe Lofgren, she had said, I think this was Wednesday night, that Pence was dangerously close, something like that, to being physically injured.
Yeah, he was 40 feet away from people
right.
in the
So-
Capitol riot.
So, and he didn't leave. So I think if after these hearings that he emerges as a candidate, it could change things for some voters, but at the same time, South Carolina is a very red state, right?
Somebody said this week in the coverage of all this that the reason Vice President Pence did not leave the Capitol, his staffers were ready to get into the car. The Secret Service wanted to evacuate them from the Capitol, and Pence did not want to go because he said he didn't want the nation or the world to see a Vice President of the United States potentially being attacked or removed from the limousine on the way back to the Executive Office building. Tom Rice, one of the 10 House Republicans who voted to impeach the president following the insurrection and who was defeated in that race, told NPR in February, if we're going to have a scenario where the president can try to intimidate Congress, we might as well have a monarchy. Isn't that precisely what Trump's supporters want?
As long as their guy's in charge, one could make that argument. I mean, well, look, we saw in the hearings come out yesterday, John Eastman, one of the top advisors to Trump in this election challenge fiasco, said it was in conversation with other aides where they acknowledged, would we want a Vice President Al Gore to have made a vote like what we want Mike Pence to do? No. Would we want a Kamala Harris to do a vote like this? No. But do we want Mike Pence to do it? Yes. So, I mean, we're seeing evidence of different rules for them versus how they want everyone else to act.
But the bottom line from yesterday is that it did come out that Trump was informed that there was no law that would support Pence overturning the election. And Eastman, he hemmed and hawed, but he agreed that he understood that was a law.
It is also becoming highly clear that he knew, even if he refused to believe, he knew that he lost the election and that the results were accurate. So his guy, Russell Fry in South Carolina, won in that race, but in another race between Republican Nancy Mace and Trump-supported Katie Arrington, Mace won. Why the difference in outcomes?
I mean,
sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, go ahead, Steve. Steve, go ahead.
I was just going to say Mace did not vote to impeach. She was critical of him, but she did not vote to impeach. And then she kind of came back close to the president. I think filmed a kind of a campaign video or a video of herself outside Trump Tower, kind of talking about her support for the president. And so that was a big difference between the two.
And South Carolina's incumbent Republican Governor Henry McMaster won easily in his primary against Harrison Trucker Bob Musselwhite of Greenville. Here's what McMaster had to say about his win.
South Carolina is booming, and we want it to boom for all of our people. So let us continue to work together. Let us continue winning. I believe in South Carolina. You believe in South Carolina. And we believe in America. And I believe in each and every South Carolinian.
He will face Democrat and former U.S. Representative Joe Cunningham in November. What are the Democrats' chances in that race?
Not good. I just want to weigh it, especially if I think if Roe versus Wade either gets overturned or comes close to being overturned, or it goes from this kind of like 23-week parameter to 15 weeks, which is what the case is before the Supreme Court. McMaster has his heartbeat bill. I think if that goes his way, it's only going to strengthen his campaign. And I don't think the January 6th, even though he is supported by Trump, I don't think that's going to make a difference, but.
If he wins, if McMaster wins in November, he will become that state's longest serving governor, which is hard for me to believe because I knew Dick Riley, who was the governor of South Carolina in the 80s, and I thought he'd been there forever. Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden is still on track to close the juvenile detention center in December and transfer staff to the main jail uptown to ease staffing shortages that they have been experiencing. He told the Mecklenburg County Commission this week that he turned down an offer from the state to rent Jail North and continue to run it as a juvenile detention center.
We had people working the pods 20 hours. And so that is a dangerous mix. And we didn't want to get back into that. So we believe that bringing in this additional staff from North will definitely help our staff, and it would help morale also.
The state's offer to rent Jail North would have prevented teenage offenders from having to be transferred to facilities as far as 3 or 4 hours away from their families. Why this decision? Is it strictly personnel based?
Well, the sheriff is in a really tough bind. You've got your main detention center that has not been operating properly for at least a year. And that the sheriff, it's nice to hear the sheriff talk about recognizing his staff is having to work nearly 24-hour shifts at the moment, because people have been trying to blow the whistle on that for nearly a year and was initially met with brush off. But at the same time, the steps that he's having to take to increase the flow of staff to the main detention center, you're having to have these trade-offs. So just let's re-highlight what you just said, Mike. Juvenile offenders who are having to be held pre-trial are now going to have to go really far away, which is not a good thing, right? For their families, for their continued upbringing. And so there's not a great solution of any kind, I don't believe. It's a problem that festered for quite a while before it got any attention.
Well, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a lot more plea offers made by prosecutors, number one. And number two, there's also going to be a lot of judges who are just going to look at cases and perhaps try to reduce the charges, maybe some more home detention, maybe even some more foster parenting, because a lot of these kids aren't in homes that are conducive to them. So all of those other areas I can see rises in because of this lack of housing for them.
So entering the lightning round here, we're going to talk about schools. Mecklenburg County Manager Dina Diorio presented her proposed budget to County Commission a couple of weeks ago and only funded half of the extra money requested by CMS for the schools. They asked for $56 million additional dollars. She proposed 20, but this week commissioners voted to add money to that recommendation. How much, Shamaria? And this was only a straw vote, so is this likely to go through finally to the commission and to the school board?
Yeah, it should. And so basically the additional money that CMS asked for a number of things, including staff raises that were required, in addition to staff raises for teacher assistants. It was $40.3 million, Dioria $20 million, but now they say they want to add an extra one-time $10 million to that. But I'll tell you this much, CMS still isn't happy about that, because in their eyes, the $40.3 million they asked for is what they needed. Someone likened it to me this way, where it's like, you have your parent and you have, you're in college, right? You're an adult. You can do what you want with your money. You ask for $20. Your parent gives you 10 and say, figure it out, even though you need that $20 for both medical expenses and for gas. It's like, well, I gave her $10, right? And that's kind of how CMS sees what the county is doing as far as money goes.
And you have been covering a stream of high school graduations of young people who have been through an extraordinary high school experience because they had the pandemic to deal with, they had school shootings and violence in schools to deal with. And I know you've interviewed some of these graduates. What have they been telling you about their high school experience as they graduate?
They've used the word resilient a lot. I mean, these kids have gone through so much. It's really hard to always hear them talk about, the people who go to school with them who are dying, right? Whether it be inside the school. One student at their graduation with Butler High talked about a student death back in 2018 after a shooting in a hallway, right? That really impacted them. They talked about tornadoes. They talked about COVID-19 and not being in those hallways. And so I think they're ready for high school to be over and hoping for a better college experience right now.
And if you're looking for a clear backpack, you may be able to get a deal because CMS has decided that they have 46,000 clear backpacks in storage that they are no longer intending to distribute to students. Interim Superintendent Hugh Hadabaugh insists that these backpacks are safe, although they do have cancer warning labels on them from the state of California, which we have on a lot of different products. But he says they are safe and the backpacks are not dangerous.
I don't believe so. There's all kinds of materials around us. Cell phones, everything has similar materials. It just had to do with the tag that was on them, I believe, that created the concern. We're going to go this route first, and we'll see if we have takers, and then we'll go from there.
And the route he's referring to, of course, is an auction. How do they plan to do this and when?
Well, I hear that they're going to sell them all to Squawks for a new number in the show.
As well they should. Shamaria?
Well, they'll actually be selling them online at government deals, and they'll be selling them in packages, how they got them. But here's the thing. They knew that they were going to sell these backpacks off a long time ago. Hadabaugh said even before he became interim. So that means they've just been ignoring us this whole time, and we've asked them about what they're doing. And I'll tell you, it's probably because they don't want any more bad, quote unquote, press about how that kind of honestly looks incompetent on their parts for not checking the bags prior to buying them or when they were in the warehouse.
Juneteenth is Sunday, the June 19th. It's now a federal holiday, not so necessarily in North or South Carolina. And today marks the 7th anniversary of the Mother Emanuel Church shooting in Charleston, where 9 church members lost their lives. WFAE's Grayson Doctor lost her mother, the Reverend DePayne Middleton Doctor, that day, something she is reminded of with every mass shooting that has occurred since.
Every time I hear about a shooting that happens, it makes me so sad, like in a way that is completely different, because I think I begin to think about like the family and, you know, like the after effects and like how much the grief and the loss like affects your life that people don't talk about.
She spoke with WFAE's Sarah D'Elia about the anniversary of the shooting and told her that the frequency of these tragedies makes her worried that we will cease to remember those who have lost their lives.
I think that is one of the most challenging things because you don't want your loved ones to be forgotten about. And in my mom's case, you know, I don't want that to be another like thing that goes down in Black history that we never talk about or never teach about.
Incidentally, Charlotte City Council member Malcolm Graham lost his sister, Cynthia Hurd, in that same shooting 7 years ago today. And with that, we have run out of time. The news roundup here with Steve Harrison, political reporter for WFAE News, Seema Iyer, chief legal correspondent for Queen City News on WJZY, Nick Oxner from WBTV, and Shamaria Morrison from WCNC. Thank you all.
Charlotte Talks with Mike Collins is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for